Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our latest webinar on cybersecurity and BACnet. My name is Monica McMahon. I'm the marketing manager here at Optigo, and I'm joined by our CEO, Ping, who's going to walk you through a lot of cybersecurity things in BACnet.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. For those who've been following us in our webinar series, and to the new ones, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you enjoyed this.
So as you've probably seen, I know a lot of you have already voted, we have a poll up right now. We want to know who you think is responsible for cybersecurity in a network. So be sure to put your answer into that poll, and we'll get the results shortly. In the meantime, just so everybody knows, this webinar is being recorded, so we will be able to send out the recording after the webinar. And so if there's anything that you think is really interesting, feel free to take notes and follow along, or you can access it after the webinar. In addition to that, feel free to ask questions at any time during the webinar. On the right-hand side of your screen, unless you've moved it, there should be a box where you can put some questions in. We do have some moderators standing by to either answer those questions or send them along to us. And just to note, we will answer some questions that are relevant in the moment as they come in, and others we will hold till the end. So let's look at the results of this poll. Just pulling it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So most people say it's the integrators or the building owner's responsibility for cybersecurity. What are your thoughts on that, Ping?
Well, I think maybe we probably should have put a fourth option, which is everyone. I think it has to start with the building owner. I mean, in the end, it is your data, it is your asset, it is your business in play. You have to be the one taking hold and taking charge of it. But then it trickles down, right? It trickles down to the integrators. I think the vendors have a very, very big play to go here. I mean, vendors typically a little ahead of the curve because development of products take months, if not years. Vendors have a very, very big role to play here. But yeah, it has to start with the owners, the CEO, the president, the board of directors taking charge in the matter of cybersecurity. Yeah.
Great. All right, so we'll close that poll and we'll get our slides up here.
Okay.
Okay, great. So just to start with a little bit of background with our history in cybersecurity, we've been doing this webinar series for a few months now. So Ping has some personal background in cybersecurity. And as well, we did earlier in this year, in August, we did a cybersecurity roundtable where we had, I think it was 6 experts from major North American institutions, banks, government agencies, universities, as well as some people from the BACnet Standard Working Committee that have been putting together some of the new changes in the BACnet protocol. And we had a discussion of the challenges and the things that you should be doing around cybersecurity in BACnet. And then we also had, last month, we had a webinar with Fred Gordy, who is the Director of Cybersecurity at Intelligent Buildings. And we discussed with Fred, first of all, how scary this concept is and how easy it is to break into a lot of buildings in some pretty high-profile locations in the United States and around the world, and what you can do about it. So, Ping, do you want to maybe give a little bit more insight into what some of the highlights of those 2 webinars were?
Yeah, absolutely. For those who didn't get the chance to watch it, the webinar with Fred Gordy is available online, I think, for us. The roundtable, unfortunately, it was a very private roundtable. We do have a small article out on automatedbuildings.com. So if you're interested in kind of the highlights, go there. There's an article that was just released a few days ago that gives the general information we discussed. The exact details we can't release because of the sensitive nature. But coming back to your question here, I think some of the highlights Fred kind of showed us concretely, instead of just talking about how important it is and what's the vulnerability of building automation, he showed us straight up. And he did a static demo because, again, we want to be careful with the sensitive nature here, how easy it is to access many, we're talking about thousands and tens of thousands of building automation systems around the world in our backyard, and some of them are, they're not mom and pop shops. These are universities, governmental agencies, shopping centers. These are places where attacks could have very significant impact. I think some of the concrete highlights were the BBMDs. These broadcast BACnet routers are extremely vulnerable. They are designed to be open. I mean, the BACnet standard is designed to be open, and the beauty of open is everyone can use them, but the bad thing is that it is extremely open. I mean, if you get access to one, and unfortunately a lot of them are not protected by firewalls, once you get to BBMD, you can get access to the entire system from there. You can relay all your messages. You can not only read properties, but you can write, you can change how things work. I mean, you could turn off lights, you can change the set points and thermostats, you can disable energy plants, power plants. These are very, very tangible and very impactful changes. And then we walked through a lot of kind of nuances around it, how to deal with them. And if I recall properly, how to deal with them, one was train the people. A big aspect of cybersecurity is train the people. Simple things like a phishing email saying that it came from the CEO asking for permission to wire transfer something. If it's suspicious, go and ask the person. That's the human aspect of it. Second was network security. Like, put in a firewall. Firewalls are very, very powerful, and they don't have to be costly. There's some very good small business routers for a couple $100 that have very good firewalls in them. And then network security at an internal network, that was an aspect. And then I think, if I remember correctly, a lot of it is kind of reporting, auditing, asset management. Know what you have, and I think that's going to be a good segue to what we're going to cover here.
Yeah, as well as a lot of, I remember a lot of physical security as well.
Yeah, right.
Ensure that you don't have something, refrigeration plant or something out in the field, out in your backyard, that somebody can walk up to and plug into your network and suddenly access that really scary BBMD that wants to give access to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So that's great. So that's our background and how we got here. Let's talk a little bit about the cybersecurity framework that's out there, and NIST has put together this framework of how you and your building should go about managing cybersecurity. So can you walk us through sort of what those 5 steps are?
Yeah, so first of all, NIST framework is not a framework that was designed specifically for the smart building industry, the building industry. It was actually designed for the critical infrastructure and how to increase cybersecurity in critical infrastructure. So a few years back, the U.S. government spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and consulted a lot of people to come up with something. It is not, again, as I said, designed specifically for smart buildings, but it is an excellent framework that can be used for pretty much any application. And there's 5 principal functions. And by the way, the important thing here is that not to read this table in a linear fashion, in a sequential fashion. It is not start with the blue one, identify, and then end with recover. Unfortunately, if you want to tackle cybersecurity properly, you have to handle all 5, all at once, in parallel. But quick highlight, identify is know what you have. Okay, so if you don't know that you have 5 computers, you thought you got 4, you're going to protect 4, and the 5th one is going to be vulnerable. Then it leads into protect. That's putting in firewalls and virus scans and network security, all these things. The third is detect, a very interesting one, a very, very, very powerful monitoring. Know when something happens, right? So detection.
And arguably one of the more challenging at this point in our industry, at least.
Yeah, for those who have looked at monitoring at the technology level, the most difficult part of detecting is what we call false positives, right? So if you get alerts every 15 minutes, and 99.9% of the time it's not a real one, the people looking at these alerts are going to start losing that will to
they're no longer alert.
That's right. Yeah, so that's yeah, exactly. And then the 4th and 5th one, which I'll be honest, I don't know too much personally. We're more on the technology side as a company, is a respond and recover. Extremely important. But if something did happen, what do you do? Right, that's really the part of it.
And have a plan in place. Don't don't wait until it happens to figure out what you do.
That's right. Exactly.
Great. Yeah. So for today, for BACnet, we're going to really focus on that first part, that identify asset management. What can you tell us about a bit more about the importance of asset management and how you might go about doing it?
Yeah, so today we're going to spend a little bit more time on identify, as you said. It's an important one because knowing what you have connected to the system is the number one thing to have so that you can do something about it. And unfortunately, in building automation systems, in control systems, in these operational technology systems, very often there's lots of vendors. It's a system that's evolved over 10, 20, 50 years. You may have vendors that came in and added an extra thing that was not part of the bill of material of the invoice. It's not malicious reasons. It's just sometimes they needed to add something to make something work. So, I mean, for those who are building controllers here, I mean, how often do we add an extra controller so we can aggregate the traffic and then pump that to another place? That controller was not really necessary for the customer. They don't see that controller, that mid-level controller. It happens all the time. So asset management is, how do you count what you have? Can you walk around with a clipboard and count every thermostat that's connected, every air handler, every valve, every water pump, everything? Can you count them all? And unfortunately, if you have a fairly large organization, you're pretty much guaranteed that the moment you stop, it's out of date, right? So, but you got to start with that. You got to start with that. And then there's also the aspect of identifying what is part of your system. What I mean by that is, if you think there's one internet connection to your building system, but actually there's a second one, maybe a vendor came in, added a DSL modem so that they could get that data and give you a better service, that second access to the internet, did you know about that? So that's another aspect of really identify. So identify is not easy to do. Most of the industry focus on the second one, protect, because we want to jump into taking action. But unfortunately, your protect will only be as effective as what you think you've protected, what you actually protected. I mean, yeah.
So to go back to the question that we started the webinar with, this asset management, who does that fall in? Is it up to the building owner to have someone walk around once a week, month, a year with a clipboard and look at the different controllers that are there and see what internet connections we have? Or is it up to an integrator to come on a regular basis? Who does this primarily fall on? If there's a magic answer, we probably know, but
that's right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think what we've seen right now is, if we categorize kind of the larger organization where they have a full-time building controls or management, the technical management of the building team, that would fall under their responsibility. But then there's this other group where the buildings don't have full-time facility management people who understand the system, or at least operate with the system. Then it falls on their prime contractor. Now again, wanting that data still comes back to the owner, right? It's your asset, it's your people, it's your information that you need to protect. Now actually doing it, where do you go to? What we've seen, what we've been recommending is call up your integrators and say, tell me what you think we have. That's a good start, right? Start from that list that they think they put in. And if you have, in many cases, we have multiple vendors, right? Ask them. And then, the down and dirty fashion, walk around and pull out the clipboard. Go to your cabinets, go to your panels, and follow the wires and look for that internet access, that modem that's on the wall. Unfortunately, that's the way it works today. There's some products out there that can help, but you got to just walk through it.
So, in an ideal world from a cybersecurity standpoint, you would have your operational network separated from your IT network. But in most cases right now, they're all converged onto one. So you have that, someone might walk up with that printer and plug it into your OT network, or they're all one. So how do you recommend managing that and working with the IT department when these assets go far beyond your BBMDs and your thermostat controllers into printers and computers and phones.
That's the one advantage in the converged network. If you do have an IT team and you leverage the IT network, you should be able to go to them and say, hey, can you tell me what are all the devices that connect to the entire network? They can give you either a list of MAC addresses or IP addresses, and then they should be able to identify, well, this 80% of that is our stuff, right? It's our computers and access points and phones and your tablet. And then there's this 20% that we don't know what it is. We being the IT department not knowing what it is. Then that's when you take that and you walk through it. The danger there is that in building automation, the traffic is sometimes very limited. So depending on when they take that snapshot, it might not have the full list. And then there's the whole MSTP side of things. Whether you go MSTP back to IP, you don't see the MSTP aspect of it through by just looking at MAC addresses and IP addresses. Once it goes through that gateway, that bridge, it only looks as one from an IT point of view. So if you do have an IT team, that's a good place to start, right? It gives you a good idea, but just remember, it doesn't show you everything.
Great. Anything else in terms of identifying asset management from this framework that you want to mention?
I think one last aspect is identifying more the human aspect of it. How many vendors do you work with? Identify what are the risks based on your environment. Let me be concrete. If you are working with 3 vendors and they're coming in on a regular basis, identify those as possible areas that may introduce risk, right? Talk to your vendors about it. And then the more important one also is, you might work with 3 vendors on an ongoing basis, but there's a 4th and a 5th that comes in once in a blue moon. You can't forget about those ones, because those are the ones that will add a device that you might not think about because you're thinking about 95% of your system. So that's a big aspect of it. And then, at Optigo, we're the same. We're offering more and more cloud services. So go and ask your cloud providers, how are they handling the data? How are they handling the access to the information? A popular way is if they only need to pull information from the system to be able to do trending or whatnot, then you can go to IT team and say, how is our firewall set up? Is a firewall only an outbound communication, which is a little safer, because it means it can't write into the system. So again, it's coming back to looking at who you.
Right. Okay. So the other thing that Fred mentioned on our webinar with him was that often your integrator, the company that you're working with on a regular basis, will have a backdoor into your system. Not that that's a bad thing, they need to have access to it. But also, can you maybe talk a little bit to managing that from a security point of view, both from the human point of view of how these different people, there may be turnover in that company, things like that, and how you might work closely with your integrator to ensure that the cybersecurity from their backdoor is managed.
Actually, on a roundtable, there was a gentleman that talked about how they handle everything that comes into their organization. What I'm saying is, you can write a framework. You can write requirements to your vendors. Simple things like every device that come in, you need to change your password. And actually, I need to change the password so that the vendor doesn't have it. Or if you need internet access, you need to request it formally, and we'll provide internet access. Work with them, because these vendors are typically there to help you. And then everything that comes in needs to be audited. And so, it can be as simple things as, give me the MAC address and the IP address you plan to use. And then you can go further into what software you're using. Are you using Ubuntu or Windows, or and what version, so you can keep an eye on the patch level. But you can start simple, which is write a simple document. It doesn't have to be long. Every time you come in, you got to tell me what you're going to do, what you're going to add or remove from a system, and what is the username and password, right? Just by simply writing this down, it should enable your system to be a little more secure, and your vendors to still be able to offer the service without feeling that they have to go around you.
Great. Okay, so I think that's a great look at sort of asset management and trying to figure out what you have. So why don't we dig in a little bit into how Visual BACnet, the tool that we've built, can help with this. That is sort of one of the main things that it can, the framework, that's sort of the main place that it can come into play. So can you show us how we can get an idea of what devices we have out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next portion of this webinar here, we're going to use both Wireshark and visualbacnet.com to show how you can leverage these two tools to get you better information on that first category, that identified category. As I said earlier, walking around with a clipboard is one way, but it's not very effective, it's very costly, and sometimes you're not going to drive or fly across the state to go do your 30, 100 sites. So when we developed Visual BACnet, we were asked, can we use this to quickly identify what are the BACnet systems, the devices on it. And so that's an easy way to do it. Let me just jump over to...
Yeah, I mean, I think while you're just getting in there, one of the things I'll mention, I had a great conversation last week about, you know, if you can have the IT department say, here are all the devices, you can have Visual BACnet say, here are all the devices. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, when you see a new MAC address and you're going, what the heck is this? In the last 3 months since I was here last, these new MAC addresses have popped up. You're still probably going to have to pull out that clipboard.
Yeah, that's right.
But it'll be a lot faster than walking around searching every wall to see if there's any new devices on it.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate goal here.
Yeah. And again, ideally, you have such a great relationship with your IT team and your vendors that you might not even need this, right? But once in a while, you might want to audit it. So so those who are not familiar with visualbacnet.com, this is an online product. There's an enterprise version also available, which is the exact same look and feel and usage. We won't dive too much into the tool at this point, but there's two things right here that we're going to use a little bit more today, and then a third right here. So device observed is basically a list of all the BACnet devices. Anything that has a source address, a device address, device ID, or anything. You can click on that. So this example here, by the way, if you want the PCAP, write to us, write to Monica. She'll be more than happy. Yeah, it's more than happy to pass it on. It's corrupt, so it's completely anonymized. So don't try to read into IP address. So the MAC addresses here, they're completely replaced.
So before we click into the actual device list, one of the things you alluded to earlier was that the IT team may give you this list that's from too small of a capture or too short amount of time. So same situation here. This is only as many devices as are active during this capture. So what would you recommend in terms of length of capture if you are trying to get a full list of your devices?
Well, so a few things here. One, the rule of thumb is about 20-minute capture. Most devices will talk at the minimum once every 15 minutes. Typically, again, you guys are the experts here, but 20 minutes is a good number. The other way you can do it is to force a global who is. So a lot of these software will allow you to do a discovery. So a global who is, will ask absolutely everyone who's out there, let me know. The other thing to keep in mind is that, especially in Ethernet and IP, the IAMs reply back are unicast. I mean, it depends which version of BACnet you're using, but a lot of them will be unicast. The unicast means that depending where you're capturing this PCAP file, this packet file, you got to be cognizant that you might not see everything. So at the BMS, at the highest level controller, that's a good place to go. But depending on how you segmented your systems, you might need to rerun it at different segments. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So 20 minutes. Force a discovery, so a global who is, and just watch where you're capturing. Sometimes you need to move where you're capturing, or you might need to capture at multiple places. Or
in an ideal world, you can set up a mirror report, although that's not always the most realistic. But
yeah, that's a very good point. If you have, again, a good relationship with the IT team, or they let you do it, or you own the network, set up a sniffing port, a mirror port on your network, and if you do it right, you should see absolutely everything in your network. Yeah.
All right, let's dig into this.
Let's dive into it. So just a simple click on that, and we'll show you every device that's captured, that's shown in this packet capture. And again, every device ID, network ID, back address, vendor ID, so you can correlate it back to who you're working with. And then there's two sections to this view. There's the fully observed and then the partially observed. Partially observed just means that in the capture file, we weren't able to match exactly a device ID to a network ID to an address to a source address. But again, this is still relevant. So go through this list, make sure everything makes sense to you, right? And if it doesn't, highlight it, and then now go look at it. Go ask whoever put it in, or you think put it in, ask them for some information there. And one thing to point out here, as you can see here, this is not just at the IP level or the MAC level. So if you have this is a good example here, devices with the same, it may be an MSTP loop that's brought into IP, you can still see all those devices. Yeah. And
it's quite, we've recently added the vendor ID. So if you are noticing that there's a ton of new devices on the network, or a few new devices, that's a great way to sort of chase down who may have put them in, or where they might have come from.
Yeah.
It may or may not help.
That's true. We should also point out that we are in the process of adding a few features. So we want to dump out this information to a CSV file, into a file, so we can bring it to Excel and delete the rows that make sense and highlight the ones we want. And then that will be available relatively quickly. And then also over time, Optigo is looking to do more what we call PCAP comparisons. So be able to take two PCAPs and compare them and showing the difference. So a simple difference will be why in this capture I had 500 devices, and this one I had 501, which is the one that's different. Or I had 500 and 500, but there's two that are different. So that's another aspect that will be added soon. So stay tuned and let us know what you think of that. But again, this is a good place to start. Yeah.
Great. And can you provide a little bit more information about if there's global who-is, should we expect it to be all fully identified devices, or how can we go about getting more information from those devices that might not be fully identified? Is that just a longer capture?
Yeah, so I mean, in this case here, global is, again, depending on the architecture of your system, it may not go into, say, MSTP loops, and the MSTP loops may not reply back all the way to the head end. And so there are some stuff to keep in mind there, but in general, global who is a good place to start. It doesn't guarantee it though. Yeah.
Great. And so these are just BACnet devices, is that right?
This is just BACnet devices. Yeah. That's right.
So
correct.
So any non-BACnet devices on the network might not show up here.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. So non-BACnet devices that don't reply over the BACnet frame will not show up here. That's right.
And what about BACnet ports? So there's your standard BACnet ports. So a lot of these most likely are using the standard BACnet ports. I know some people set up non-standard BACnet ports. Is that recommended? And how do you go about working with that?
Very great question. So two-part here. So first of all, from the tool point of view, from visualbacnet.com point of view, anything that's in that standard range, so 47808 to 47823, will be identified here. So if you're using multiple ports, it will still catch them all. And then if you're using a non-BACnet standard port, whatever it is, there is a way right now when you read in the PCAP file to define your non-standard port, and once it's read in, it will be identified the same way here. I guess I should, just to show everyone very quickly here, if you were looking to read in a PCAP file that doesn't have, that doesn't use the standard BACnet port, you go to up here on your top right-hand side, go to settings. It's a global setting right now. You type in the port that you use, so 47807, for example. Save the change. You'll have to upload the file at this point. So if you upload a file at this point, it would use that port to also identify BACnet frames.
Great. Yeah. So from a cybersecurity perspective, is there a recommendation in terms of using standard ports or non-standard ports, which is better?
Well, that's where in cybersecurity often we talk about the trade-off between security and ease of use. From a pure security point of view, it would be slightly better to use non-standard BACnet ports because it's less like people are looking for it. But I mean, what you give up is that now a vendor coming in, you got to tell them what port you're using every time. They're not going to look for it on their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you're extremely concerned about BACnet, about the vulnerable BACnet, because it's so open and it's completely unencrypted, one easy way is to hide it under a different port.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So what else can we do in terms of digital BACnet? Oh, we're just going to look at a question here.
Yeah, we have a question coming in. How do we do this?
There you go.
Right.
All right. So question here. So BACnet ports are usually left open in a network, allowing anyone who makes a port scan of the network to see all of the BBMDs and very likely communicate with them. So how can we protect the network from an outsider doing a port scan?
The simple answer is firewalls again here. So even if you're leveraging a IT network, get your own VLAN, go through a router before you're allowed to go anywhere else, a firewall, and then using the firewall, you can define just the port that you're allowed. Now, unfortunately, it will still find that port if you do the port scan. But there are ways to block port scans, but that's one thing. So go through a firewall, block just what you need, and define that. There are also ways to look for. I mean, some of these firewalls are able to block port scans.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that question. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the question box.
Yes. Actually, I have a feeling we have a lot of our good friends online. So if you can help us with some of these questions, please join in, and we'll relay your better answer.
Yeah, we love getting both questions and answers through the question box. We know we have a lot of very smart people out there.
Yes. And
experienced people. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what else? So that's great. You can get a list of your devices and know exactly what's there if you've added new things, if things are no longer on that network. What other ways are there besides just the list of devices to do asset management, to know what's going on in your network and keep it safe?
There's one, it's a little less tangible, but it's extremely powerful, is to look at your network trend or a form, visualizing your network. I mean, ideally, you want to go through every device and you want to see this device is communicating this often to these places. Does that make sense, right? But again, if you have 1,100 devices doing that, I mean, hire a good co-op and they'll do it for you, I guess. But it's very time-consuming. Again, there are tools available for that, but you can start with a glance of it. Right? Look at the form of your traffic. If you are looking at your traffic yesterday and today, and the form is very different, can you explain the change? Right? If suddenly there's a spike of traffic at 7 a.m., follow it. Can you see where that traffic is going to or from? So I'll give you a quick example using Visual BACnet here. So this gives you an overall look at your traffic. By the way, again, many of you have already guessed it, there's global who is being sent out every 60 seconds. That's what causes these peaks, right? So I'm not saying there's a vulnerability in this case, but we're just using it as an example.
It's a very happy device.
Very, yes. Yes, they know about each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you use your traffic by source, destination, and type, it generates a graph which allows you to filter, sort, zoom in. So for example, again, this is not the case, but if we're curious, what is this extra spike in the middle? Zoom in, click and drag, release, and then the table on the bottom side here will always dynamically adjust to what you zoomed into. So what you see here matches what you see in the table. And then again, you can zoom in some more. You hover your mouse over it, and does this make sense? So this device here, again, the MAC address is anonymized. is sending a broadcast IM, 55 packets in this 1 second. Doesn't make sense, right? But again, we're not saying you go through every line, but look at it. Take a snapshot, and you can generate a PDF. Take a snapshot, and then in a month, do it again. And if it doesn't look the same, you should be able to explain that. In many cases, you'll find that it's different because of operational reasons. I mean, you added in new trending, you added in new controls.
Winter. Now all these devices are online. They weren't in summer.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thing. But again, if you cannot explain it, you should look into it. In cybersecurity, one of the things is don't brush anything off, right? If you have any type of doubt, go through it, figure out what that means, because it's the smallest thing that will trigger an alert into the problem. Yeah. So looking at your network traffic is one thing to again, identifying what you have. So if you cannot identify what your traffic is doing, you should look into that.
So is this something that you would still recommend, this 20-minute capture, or is this something that you should look at as 24-hour capture and see what happens at 7 a.m. and see what happens at 5 p.m. when the office closes?
Yeah, ideally you want it continuous, right?
Yeah.
You want to do it all the time and be able to scan through it. My recommendation almost is do it randomly, right? You don't want short durations because short durations won't give you that trend. You want a good 30-minute hour. And again, what we're talking about here, now we're talking about vulnerabilities that are continuous, someone that's continuously impacting the system. More likely, unfortunately, is an attack that's very short duration. And so now it's a matter of statistical probability of catching that at the right time. And so, I mean, if you can't afford it, you run it every hour continuously, and you keep that up. But again, it's probably not available to everyone. But if you can, do that. You take a good capture. Again, 20 minutes an hour. It's probably a good rule of thumb. And then do it randomly. Right? Do it in the morning, do it at night. Schedule it in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day. So it increases the possibility of catching problems.
Great. Okay, so we alluded at the beginning to these BBMDs, which are a little bit scary from a cybersecurity point of view, but amazing from a building automation point of view.
Yeah.
What can we do to help make those a bit safer?
Yeah, and again,
how can we keep an eye on them?
That's right. So unfortunately, we're not going to teach you how to make it safer, although there is a couple of things you can do. But in visualbacnet.com, again, a simple thing is very similar to the device browser that we talked about earlier. If you click on your BBMD traffic, it shows you every packet that has a forwarded NPDU. So typically a packet that would go through a BBMD and be rebroadcasted out would be marked as a forwarded NPDU. This is a list. The source here is the original source. So a device that sent a message to the BBMD that's then re-forwarded shows up here. Go through this list. Make sure that every source makes sense, right? So the example that Fred gave us, if we did that at the right time, we would catch an external access, which you could not explain. Right? Now, of course, network address translation, all these things make things a little bit more complicated. And an account on this side is how many of these packets will be caught in this time frame. So again, using that in your advantage, if you do it 20 minutes yesterday and you're doing that 20 minutes today, the numbers are drastically different. Can you explain the difference there? I wanted to just take a quick moment on this one, just to show for those who perhaps are not on visualbacnet.com, if you wanted to do this in Wireshark, it is possible. So I brought up the exact same file in Wireshark. So as I said, look for packets that have a forwarded NPDU. That's an easy one to do. So in this case, you want to go BVLC. It's at the BVLC level. I already did it earlier. So dot function equals 4 or forwarded NPDU. That will give you every packet that has a forwarded NPDU that's being rebroadcasted by BBMD. So this allows you to catch that chatty BBMD, that BBMD that's easily exploited, right? From there on, again, if you wanted to go a little bit deeper, find in your BVLC field the IP field. This is the original IP address. An easy way to do that, click on it, right-click, apply as a column. It will add it as a column here.
Okay.
Now, now if you take this, you can dump it into an Excel file. So if you export, let me see, how do we do this? Export specific packets, and something here. No, this is not right. You can export the fields. Packet dissection. There it is. As a CSV file.
Export packet dissection as CSV. Great.
Yeah. So this will dump the columns that you displayed here into a CSV file. Then you can take it in Excel, take the source column, take the IP column, sort it, count it, and then you can kind of see what makes sense and what doesn't.
And then do the same thing next month and compare those columns.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, what we're talking about here is a lot of work, but we wanted to just show if you didn't want to do it, it is possible to do. Yeah. And
maybe it's a lot of work that you do once a year.
That's right.
Ideally more, but.
That's right. Or I mean, again,
as long as you do it.
This is the type of thing you can ask a vendor to do for you, right? It's definitely a service that I'm sure they would value in offering. You can work together to create the ability to do an auditing of your system.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you have. Yeah.
We may find out with some of the vendors who are online and they come back to us.
That's right. Yeah. Actually, on that note, I wanted to say cybersecurity typically has a negative connotation. For all the service providers out there, it is my opinion right now that as vendors, as service providers, we actually have a huge opportunity, a business opportunity here for all those there that are willing to learn and go forward and offer some level of cybersecurity auditing, protection, services. You can differentiate yourself. I mean, if you go to your customer, whether they're a large property developer or a governmental institution, and you say, look, I can offer you the ability to do an asset management, an asset accounting. I can offer you the ability to do an auditing. You're going to outclass, your competitors. So for all the business owners out there, cybersecurity is an opportunity, not a burden. Right now, it's highly needed. So if you're interested, there's lots of great material out there. Obviously, we're happy to help point in the right direction. The NIS2 framework is a good place to start, and try it out. Right.
And it's an area that's changing constantly right now.
Yeah.
There's so many new tools coming in to help with it, and changes into different ways that people can access networks. So
and BACnet International has a whole security clause, and you can do encrypted tunnels now, which will be far more secure. So things are changing a lot. Yeah.
I think to end the main content piece, I will end with a comment from one of the people that was on our cybersecurity roundtable that said, you know what, if at the end of the day, if none of this is working, just build a bigger wall.
Yes, that's right. And just with some context in this case, so this is a very sensitive, regulated customer or establishment, and when it means bigger wall, so their system is completely offline.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that goes in must be documented.
Completely segregated network.
Completely segregated. There's no cloud connection at all. Everything is completely documented going in and out. I mean, we're not saying that everyone needs to do this, but there are ways to do it, and now you just got to do compromising between security and
efficiency and access to information.
That's it. Correct.
Great. So I think that's the main meat of the presentation for me, at least. I don't have any more questions. If anyone else has any questions, definitely put those in the questions pane. I don't see any at the moment. Ping, is there anything that you would like to finish on, to add as comments?
Yeah, I mean, I really made probably the most important one from my part is many of us, Fred, Gordy, myself, lots of people, Mark Peacock at LinkSpring, we talk about cybersecurity all the time. Fred is an expert. I understand enough to be dangerous about it, but as I said, there's a great opportunity here to look at how to change your services to offer higher security, hybrid privacy, and your vendors will value that. It's what we believe. Actually, we're seeing it for ourselves at Optigo. Other than that, we're here to help. The chat box at the bottom of visualbacnet.com. You don't even need a subscription for that. It goes straight to Monica and a couple of developers. Got questions, comments, ideas? Let us know, and Together, I think we can build very efficient, very well-operated systems that won't be, won't make the cover of the Times Magazine because it was using a BBMD to go and turn off a power plant that took down the school. That's a crazy aspect to it.
Yeah.
It's actually not that hard to do.
I mean, slowly but surely, the trade-off between secure and efficient, effective, easy to use is becoming less of a trade-off.
That's it. Yeah.
That's our ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we, as a lot of you probably know, this is a webinar series, so we have another webinar coming up next month about how healthy your building network is, and using Visual BACnet for building owners to get an idea of exactly, beyond cybersecurity, some of the features and ways that it can help with managing that building. So definitely feel free to join that or send that out to the building owners and managers that you work with. And check out all of our other webinars. We do have one coming up in a couple weeks as well on passive optical networking, more on the hardware side of the company. So you can check those out at optigo.net/webinars. That's the end of my little commercial there.
Yeah.
But we'd love to, hopefully we'll see you again, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Have a good day.
Bye.